Hello and welcome to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Adam Morgante, and joining me is my other host, Caleb Yauger. Today we will be talking about women's basketball, men's basketball, softball, and baseball. Now first we will be talking about the women's basketball team. So far this season they have a 3-7 record. Caleb, what happened in their last two games this season?
Yeah, the last game they played against Franciscan, it was their one of their last games before they played Teal again, but it's against Franciscan they won 75-53. Brooke Fuller had 18 points and 19 rebounds. Orlosky had 13 points and 15 rebounds, another double-double for Andrea Orlosky and Brooke Fuller as well. And they had 42 points in the paint in that game as well. And then going into the game where they beat Teal 72-67 in overtime, it took a little bit more to decide that game, especially in the first round of the PAC playoffs. In Teal outscored Waynesburg 26-16 in the fourth quarter, and Rachel Breckenridge had 5 threes throughout the game, and she really heated up in that second half, only having 3 points in that first half, but then really starting to heat things up in that second half.
Yeah, that was really the main reason I think why Teal was able to come back. Breckenridge only had 3 points. She had 4 threes in the second half. They were up by 9 points at one point in the fourth quarter, but they were able to come back. It seemed like Breckenridge, she hit 3 after 3 after 3. And in overtime, Waynesburg, they never trailed in overtime. The hero, Marley Wolf, she scored 6 of Waynesburg's 9 points in that overtime period, including the go-ahead 3 early on in overtime. She really stood out for me in that game. She picked up 16 points, second leading scorer behind Andrea Orlosky in that game with 18 points. So Marley Wolf, she really played well in that overtime and stepped up as a freshman. I said something in that game when I was announcing. She really showed like she was one of the seniors on the team with how she stepped up her play in overtime. And now moving over to, or before we go to the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team, they play St. Vincent tonight in the quarterfinal round of the President's Athletic Conference, and they look to go to the PAC semifinals for the first time since 2016-2017. Now, let's move to the men's basketball team. What did you see in their last 2 games of the season, Caleb?
Yeah, in that one game they faced Grove City, a very, very talented Grove City team, and Justice Rice for the Grove City had 18 points, and they had about 12 different players in the scoring category for Grove City, and in Waynesburg, Matt Popek had 39 points in that game, a huge contribution, and Isaiah Alonzo had a huge contribution too. They had about 53 combined points. And of Waynesburg's 65. So other players only scored about 12 points for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets, but Grove City came up in the end. And looking at that game, it was just a great victory for Grove City, and just to see how talented that Wolverine team is.
Yeah, Matt Popek had 39 points, career high, 60% from the field. Very quickly, they lost their first-round PAC game against St. Vincent on Saturday, 72-58. So their season is over. They finished the season 3-7. Now, moving quickly over the baseball, they start off the year 0-4 so far this season, Caleb.
0-4 to start the season, and not to mention against one of the best pitching teams in the PAC as well in Grove City. Some closer games, but that second game they lost 13-3, and the bats weren't really going well for Waynesburg in any of those games, and that was the most runs they scored out of those 4 games.
Yeah, now to the Waynesburg softball team. They're 5-3. They split with Bethany this weekend in their doubleheader. And really, one player that has really showed up for me is Reagan Benschoter. I believe she's been the best hitter for this softball team. But that's all the time we have in this first segment. Coming up next, Jared Weicker will be with us to talk about men's basketball. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV, and here to talk about men's basketball, we have our analyst, Jared Weicker. And Jared, past couple games for Waynesburg, they played a tough Grove City team, the one that got rescheduled due to COVID-19, and then they played that first playoff game for the PAC against St. Vincent. Let's give a recap of those.
Yeah, so against Grove City, it was a 77-65 loss. Grove City had a very good start in that game, 15-5 run in the first 5 minutes. The Jackets really had to play catch up there. Waynesburg was able to keep up with the scoring, answering Grove City eventually later in that first half, but still trailed 37-25 at halftime. Waynesburg then had a strong start in the second half, only trailing by 7 in the first 3 minutes, able to get back and wear out that 12-point deficit. Grove City regained a 12-point lead, however, later in the second half, up 49-37. And then Waynesburg, answered back with a 12-2 run and was down 51-49 with just over 11 minutes remaining in that second half. So really back and forth. Matt Popek scored 9 of the 12 points on that run. Grove City then took a 9-0 run and closed out the game for the 77-65 win. And as Caleb and Adam mentioned before, Matt Popek, really the highlight of that game, scoring 39 points for him, the first time in a PAC game since 2013-2014. And Waynesburg really shooting the ball well in that game, over 47%, 26 of 55 in the first half and over 56% in the second half. Grove City also shot well, over 50% in that game, and also out-rebounded Waynesburg 37-25.
Yeah, and in that game against Grove City, you mentioned they shot well. Waynesburg shot 47% from the field, and they shot 43% from three. Normally, if you see those numbers, that means it should lead to a victory. But why do you think, despite those good shooting numbers, that Waynesburg wasn't able to come out on top against Grove City?
Really, I mean, it was Waynesburg just let Grove City run away late in the game with that. I mean, as I mentioned, some runs late in the game. Waynesburg had one of their own, but Grove City, 2 of them, 2 runs at the end of the game to really open it up. And Grove City also 3 players scoring in double digits in that game, including Justice Rice with 18 points. So yeah, Matt Popek had 39 for the Jackets, but there wasn't much depth scoring. Isaiah Alonso had a good game in that as well, but Grove City, really, the scoring was widespread.
Mm-hmm. And looking at that differential in the scoring between Grove City had 12 different guys scoring, versus Waynesburg, where Matt Popek and Isaiah Alonso carried the majority of the team. And how much has the diversity of the scoring impacted them in that game and also in the St. Vincent game as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. Going over to the St. Vincent game when they lost, I mean, Waynesburg, the depth didn't show up. Only 13 points scored outside of Isaiah Alonso, Matt Popek, and Jansen Knotts in that game. And Waynesburg ended up losing that game 72-58. So, recap this playoff game. Waynesburg started strong and looked great. They had a 12-4 lead early after a 10-0 run in the first half. Waynesburg was up 36-27 at halftime and kept the lead going into the second half until St. Vincent then took the lead 49-48 with about 9 minutes left in the second half. So, I mean, as I mentioned, a strong start for Waynesburg. Just it couldn't keep it up. St. Vincent outscored Waynesburg 21-6 in the last 5.5 minutes of the game, which that really obviously widened things, broke things open, and defensive breakdowns really is uncharacteristic of the Jackets this season. They were second in defense overall in the PAC this season, but last in offense. When looking through the entire season. Shamar Bennett in that game double-double with 10 rebounds and 14 points, and 4 players scored in double digits for St. Vincent, including Anthony Dilliard, who also had 14 points. So really uncharacteristic for the Jackets in defensive play.
All right, thank you, Jared. Great stuff as always. Coming up next here on Jacket Sports Weekly, Joe Venzel will recap the women's basketball team. Don't go anywhere.
Zuzik into the end zone, almost untouched.
The middle, back out to Delaney, 3 ball. How about, yes.
Cuts up inside, into the end zone. Touchdown, Trenton Carter.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV, and here to talk about women's basketball is our analyst Joe Venzel. And Joe, Waynesburg coming off 2 victories against Franciscan, the last regular season game at home, and also the first playoff game against Teal. Can we get a recap of some of those?
Yeah, Franciscans, they played the 9th of March, and it was a pretty blowout game. Jackets taking the victory 75-53 with the 2 powerhouses at the forward position. Andrea Orlosky with the double-double in that game, 13 points and 15 rebounds, and also junior forward Brooke Fuller with 18 points, 19 rebounds in that one. And freshman Marley Wolf, as you guys talked about earlier in the show, fantastic showing in that one as well, 15 points. Like I said, as a freshman, she has really showed up, especially in the Franciscan game to start off, and like you said, we'll get into the playoff game against Teal. But yeah, Marley definitely showed some promise in that Waynesburg basketball team in the Franciscan win, and a good win to put over them going into the playoffs against Teal.
Yeah, and also Abigail Green, she had 11 points, so she was the 4th Lady Jacket to score in double figures, tied a career high for her. And also, Waynesburg had 42 points in the paint in that game from Franciscan. Why do you think they were so successful down low?
Sam Jones, definitely, I could see him in that game when he was bringing them to the huddle, showing the plays that they needed to do, give it to Andrea, give it to Brooke, making the plays that they did with Anika and Marley, setting screens, getting the pick and roll going, get their inside scores very well. Like you said, 42 points in the paint. That's a lot of points in the paint, especially against a pretty easy 10th seed team in Franciscan. Not too much defense on their side. But yeah, definitely Sam Jones put the effectiveness on Brooke and Andrea scoring in the paint in that one.
And looking at that Saturday playoff game against Teal, exactly a week beforehand, it was the same situation. Waynesburg won against Teal at home at the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse, 64-47. But then the turnaround, and Teal makes it an overtime game. What were some of the factors that made it that close?
Teal only scoring 9 points in the third quarter, not looking like an overtime game in that one, but then scoring 26 points in the fourth quarter, outscoring Waynesburg 16 in that one, with Rachel Beckenridge 21 points for the Teal Tomcats in that one. And that when they get effective scoring like that late in the game, it's going to be tough pressured against this Sam Jones run defense in the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets. But like I said, they persevered in that one going OT. Sam Jones know what he had to do, and he set his players up in the right time. Like I said, Marley Wolf coming up with 6 points, the hero in that overtime win, only holding St. Vincent to 4 points in the overtime. And definitely the defense showed up in the overtime, but like I said, in the last 2 quarters, not showing as much promise as they wanted to. But if they really ride with the defense going into the next game, they'll definitely be effective in that one.
You mentioned Marley Wolf. She had 16 points, 6 points in overtime. So what do you think was the key to her having a big game and stepping up big for the Lady Jackets in overtime?
Getting the shots that she knows that she can hit. She can definitely score outside the perimeter with the 3 balls and making the plays that she does effectively, the mid-range and the outside. If she can keep making those shots, we'll definitely see a Waynesburg team ride into these playoffs very well.
Thank you very much, Joe Venzel, for your analysis on the women's basketball team. And when we come back, Adam Morgante sits down with Andrea Orlosky in an exclusive interview.
We're going to fade up to camera 3 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, take it.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly for our interview segment. I'm Adam Morgante, and joining me today is senior Waynesburg women's basketball player Andrea Orlosky. And Andrea, first question. I talked to you before the season started. Your personal goal was to reach 1,000 points. You did that. So when you reached 1,000 points, what was that feeling like?
It was really just an incredible feeling. Just to actually reach that milestone and get to it was something that I never thought I could actually do in college. So the fact that I was able to do it and that it did happen, it's just an amazing feeling.
Right now, you are the 11th all-time leading scorer in Waynesburg history. So I guess, who else do you want to mention in thanking you to help reach your milestone, not only for this season, but your past 4 years to helping you become the player that you are?
Yeah, I'd like to thank literally everyone who has been involved with my basketball career since coming to Waynesburg. So obviously Coach Jones, all the other coaches that are involved, even going back to my freshman year, like I would thank Addie Knetzer and Rachel Lang and McKenna Drazik because they honestly are what started it all for me. So I'd like to thank them. And then obviously Monica Starr, and then this year's specifically just the whole team for them just cheering me on and like knowing that this was something I could do and just helping me to get there, knowing that I could get there. So I thank everyone who was involved.
With this season having pretty much no fans allowed at any of your games, but with it being senior day, your parents were allowed to be there. So I guess, how much of a surprise was it for you? How much did it mean for you, for your parents to be able to be there in person to see you get that milestone?
Yeah, that was probably going to be one of my favorite days that I'll ever remember, just because they were there and we won and I got my 1,000 points and it was my senior night. Like, just all of the above just made this day so perfect for me, and just having them there because they've been there for me since I started my basketball career, since I was just a toddler. Like, just having them there just really made me miss like having them there at every game, and just realizing how much the season sucks, honestly, without seeing their faces in the stands.
Joining me now on Jacket Sports Weekly is women's basketball player Andrea Orlosky for an interview. And Andrea, take me back to before you even came to Waynesburg. What made you decide that you wanted to come here for basketball?
Yeah, at first I really actually had no plans of coming to Waynesburg. I was set on going to a different school, actually Pitt Greensburg, and then something fell through with the coach there, so it made me reevaluate my options, and Coach Jones reached out to me and I came for a visit, and it just kind of, when you know, you know. So when I was visiting there, I just kind of realized that, wow, this is where I want to be for both basketball and for getting my criminal justice degree.
Awesome. So throughout your 4 years, how much have you seen yourself grow as a player on and off the court?
Tremendously. I think about my freshman year and how much I looked up to so many of the players there, and then I guess probably my sophomore year when I had that really big season for me and really improved a lot from my freshman years when I started to notice the change. But that was as a player. So just going from that, from junior to senior year, is like as a leader and as a captain, I just realized the growth I had, and I saw that, oh, these girls are now looking up to me, so I have to set a good example.
From a team perspective, this season, like, what were some of the ups, what were some of the downs for you from a team perspective?
I think as a team perspective, it was just trying to find the right five on the court, like connecting with everyone, and then just having that passion and energy. Sometimes we wouldn't have it for games, or we would kind of hang our heads, but just from the first game with Grove City was probably one of our best games, just because our energy was so high and our focus was so high, and we just really played as a team. And then throughout the rest of the season, we had it, but then it just kind of went away sometimes. So I think the biggest takeaway, at least for the girls to learn for next season, is to just keep that high going.
What are some of your favorite moments while playing basketball at Waynesburg University?
Yeah, there's definitely a bunch of moments, but by far my favorite would be my parents coming to my senior night game. Would be the biggest highlight. But other things that I can remember is when Julie hit a buzzer beater for a win. I think that must have been my freshman or sophomore year, but that was a big win. When I got my all-time high of 33 points my sophomore year, that was a good memory for me. But a lot of the memories honestly just come from like practices or off the court with my teammates. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Andrea. That was our interview segment with women's basketball player Andrea Orlosky. Coming up next on Jacket Sports Weekly, Riley Holsinger will recap the women's softball team. Don't go anywhere. We're back on Jacket Sports Weekly, and joining us here in the studio is our softball analyst, Riley Holsinger. And Riley, what are some observations you've seen from the softball team so far this season?
Yeah, so even over the past 2 years, we haven't seen a lot of the softball team in general, only because of the COVID-19 shortened season last year. So I've been primarily looking at the freshmen and the sophomores for this softball team, and these past 2 recruiting classes by manager Brett Shimmick, they've impressed me so much. Because just looking back, we'll take a look at the sophomores first. We didn't see a lot of them, as I mentioned last year, but we did get a little bit of a sample size from them. Bryn Hunter. Adam, you might say Reagan Benschoter is the best hitter on this team. I believe it's Bryn Hunter by far. She's a top 10 hitter in the President's Athletic Conference in general. Last season, she had a 368 average. She's improving on that this year. She has a 483 average just in this short season alone. She's 14 of 29 from the plate. 8 RBIs. She's been an amazing hitter for them. But the primarily reason for the softball team's success has been the pitcher, Ella Brookman. She's 2-0 this season with a save, second in the President's Athletic Conference in ERA, fourth in batting average against. She has a 1.91 ERA. She's been the ace for this Waynesburg softball team in general, and she's just done a great job for them. Named PAC Pitcher of the Week last week as well.
And looking at the softball team, they haven't dropped 2 games in a series. They've taken both against Teal, but every other time they split the series 1-1. So where do you see the softball team heading into further down into the season?
Yeah, so right now all of the games they have been playing, they haven't counted towards the President's Athletic Conference record. It's counted towards their overall record. But I see this team continuing to grow throughout the season. This is a very young team, and to see them playing so well early on, it really encourages me. Just by the way they've been playing. This team is second in the President's Athletic Conference in batting average, but there are a lot of areas that I could see this team improving on as well, Caleb.
What are some of the things the softball team has to continue to be doing, Riley, to continue on to have a good season?
Yeah, the softball team can continue to score more. That's one of the biggest things that I see. This team is middle of the pack in the President's Athletic Conference when it comes to scoring. They are 5th in runs in the PAC. They're 2nd in the PAC in striking out in general, and this team needs its veterans to step up. I mentioned the freshmen and the sophomores. Well, the veterans need to step up, and the 2 people that I'm looking at are Hannah Bitovsky and Emma Kubalak. Those 2 could really be key contributors for this team if they get hot throughout the season.
All right, thank you, Riley. Great stuff. Coming up next, Nicholas Callis will sit down with us to talk about everything you want to know about Waynesburg baseball. Don't go anywhere.
Piracy is a crime. If you see someone downloading copyrighted material without paying for it, then you should inform the authorities immediately. If you download any copyrighted material from the internet without paying for it, then you should go to jail.
We're back on Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV, and here to talk about Waynesburg University baseball is our analyst, Nicholas Callis. And Nicholas, this Waynesburg University baseball team coming off to a slow start, 0-4 against a very good pitching Grove City Wolverines team. Can you kind of give us an analysis of what we've seen so far from this team?
Yeah, well, I like to remind people, they see a sweep against Grove City and they might go, ooh, Grove City is a great team. Most of their athletics are pretty good. But I will remind everybody that in 2019, the last baseball game that Waynesburg competed in, not in Florida, one of them was against Grove City in the playoffs, right? Waynesburg was up 9-2 going into the 7th inning of that game. They ended up losing 15-11 because they gave up 10 runs in the 7th and then just couldn't keep up in the later innings. So, this is a Waynesburg team that's still pretty good. They have some pieces from that playoff team that are still here, and they have some talented freshmen as well on the team now. So I like to remind everybody, hey, calm down. This team's still pretty good. I don't think they should have got swept against Grove City, but the games mostly were close. The one blowout in Game 2, just poor pitching, a few errors, and a 13-3 final score. But really, I think that they'll be okay. It was just a matter of a lack of offense, and some of the pitchers struggled. And the defense committed 6 errors in the series. Not great.
You mentioned that there was a lot of players from that 2019 season that contributed that are back this season. So who are some of those key players that you see contributing even more this year?
Well, Joe Sablak's pretty good. He's tall, 6'5", Throws pretty hard. He's like the replacement for Mason Miller. He'll probably be the ace, one of the top pitchers on the team now. He gave up a few earned runs in the game, 4 earned runs in game 2 out of 8 total, but he was in the game where they committed 4 errors. I think he'll do well, though, coming down the stretch. Chris Lee is a veteran catcher, first baseman. I think he'll do pretty well. He's a good offensive player for certain. Evan Homison, who's now a junior, he's got a powerful bat, a bit inconsistent, but he's still pretty good defensively in the outfield, and he can play some catcher as well, and he hits well. And then Brandon Durbin for Waynesburg, who plays third base and first base. He's another good offensive player. Tyler Shabinovich as well, who's a two-way guy. He throws hard. He'll be in the starting rotation or he'll be closing. It's one or the other, still undecided yet. He's been experimenting with both, but he's also a good outfielder, and he could still hit. So those are a few guys for you.
And now, Nick, you mentioned that Mason Miller, a really standout player for this baseball team last season, and unfortunately the season got cut short, and Mason Miller went on to play at Division I Gardner-Webb. And who are some of the guys that are going to have to step up, and can this team really bounce back from losing such a great pitcher?
They can. Pitching isn't just one person you want to focus on. I mean, it's great when you have that kind of ace, but again, Mason Miller started that playoff game against Grove City a couple years ago. He gave up 2 earned runs, got pulled in the 7th, and then Waynesburg gave up 10 runs in that inning to lose the game. So you're going to need some more pitchers for certain. So I don't think it's devastating. I think that this is something that needed to happen. But like I said, Joe Sablak's a guy that should break out and should take the helm at the starting rotation. Tyler Serbinovich is throwing close to 90. So, I mean, he's a player and an upperclassman they're going to need to rely on. But some of these freshmen as well. Ryan Sullivan started a game against Grove City. He gave up 2 earned runs on 5 hits and 3 innings pitched, which isn't too bad. Justin Clevenger came in to relieve him and gave up no earned runs on 1 hit. So, I mean, there are a few young guys in there, too, that I see that could make an impact pitching. So it's good that they don't have to rely on Mason Miller anymore, to allow them to spread out, focus more on the pitching, and hopefully they can improve that, because I think pitching is one of their weakest points.
Absolutely. We'll see as the season goes on, but thank you very much, Nicholas, for your analysis on our baseball team. And when we come back, we'll give our top 5 athletes of the week here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. It's time for Caleb and I to reveal our top 5 Waynesburg athletes. Caleb, who do you have on your list?
Yeah, for my top 5 athletes of the week, starting at number 5, Ella Brookman. She's been really stepping it up for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets softball team, and she was ranked as a PAC Pitcher of the Week not too long ago. And she got the double. She won the second game of the doubleheader against Bethany yesterday in the 2-0 shutout. And number 4, I have Marley Wolf. Marley Wolf had 16 points against Teal in the first round of the playoffs for Waynesburg. And she, like I said, she had 16 points, and she had 6 points in overtime. Some of the first couple points there for Waynesburg in that overtime period. And then we have Andrea Orlosky. Andrea Orlosky overall at number 3. Just overall having a great season, considering only a 9-game season, averaging a double-double and really leading these Waynesburg Yellow Jackets. And number 2, Isaiah Alonzo. Even though he kind of had a rough game against St. Vincent and against Grove City, he did produce a lot of points. But as the season went on, I mean, he's just been a consistent part of the Yellow Jackets. And then Matt Popek, overall number 1. The season's ended for the Waynesburg Yellow Jacket men basketball team, but 39 points against Grove City, and really just a comeback story. That's why he's my number 1.
All right, our top 5 is similar, especially at 4 and 5. Number 5, I also have Ella Brookman. She's picked up 2 wins already for the Waynesburg softball pitching staff, so she's at number 5. Marla Wolf at number 4, like you mentioned, her clutch performance in overtime in that Teal game, scoring 6 of the 9 points. She had 16 points in that game, and then she also had 15 points in Franciscan, so a big week for Marley Wolf this past week. Number 3, I have Reagan Benshower. She's been probably the best hitter for the Waynesburg softball team so far. She had a home run in their 17-9 win over Teal, and she also had another home run in their 8-6 win over Grove City. So she's been a really good consistent hitter so far early on for the softball team. Number 2, I have Matt Popek. As you mentioned, he dropped a career high 39 points against Grove City. He really got back to the Matt Popek of old before he suffered that knee injury last year, to where it took him a few games to get back on his feet, but he really went back to his normal scoring. And number 1, I have Andrea Orlosky, the leader of this Waynesburg women's basketball team, averaging 16 points per game. She, of course, scored 1,000 points against Teal and counting. And she's just been a great player so far for Waynesburg this season and really throughout her career. So that's why Andrea Orlosky gets the top spot for me. But that's going to do it for us here on Jacket Sports Weekly. Make sure you tune in next time for everything you want to know about Waynesburg sports.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.